Once Told Tales, as read by the author Rick Tobin.
Siren's Call by Rick Tobin. Hundreds of years ago, in what is now southern Ontario, Canada, a collision of cultures created an environment of chaos and distrust, like three comets meeting at the same time. The Ojibwa tribes, with their own beliefs in God and creation, had occupied much of the area around Lake Ontario for untold ages. But now came European settlers, with diverse interests and with their own religious and political conflicts, namely the English Protestants and the French Catholics. Mixed in the middle of this soup were the Huguenots, a people of Protestant faith who had escaped from violent persecution from primarily French Catholics and then migrated to other Protestant strongholds like Britain and Ireland, until they eventually decided to risk finding religious freedom in the New World. This story is about two star-crossed lovers who are caught in the middle of this perfect storm. The rustic home and huts of the Huguenot village were cold during the frigid winter months, so when spring broke out along the thick forests and melted away the ice flows of the rivers, and along the banks of Lake Ontario, the villagers flocked to find fresh food and exchange of goods, reluctantly from local Ojibwa tribes, who were skilled at hunting and foraging, even in the coldest seasons. These trade forays were of little interest to Murin Besant, a recent addition the year before, as more Huguenot migrants from Ireland and England sailed the perilous Atlantic waters to join the struggling colonists of New France. Not that the French Catholic settlers welcomed them, indeed not, but for a time there was enough challenge to staying alive in the new frontier and the spaces between their settlements that outright battles were avoided. The pressures came as Catholic priests attempted entry into Huguenot villages to save the heretics. Murin found none of this interesting or helpful in her search for peace with the New World. Her grandmother, Amy, had died of fever during the middle of the worst winter storms. There was not enough firewood to protect her from their small cabin's chill. Few neighbors fared better. Several babies were also lost in the severe conditions. In the middle of a quickly warming spring, Murin began searching the woods and fields alone to find the herbs, berries, and roots that Amy had shown her to help make medicines to heal her comrades, even though they still had little trust for wise women, for Amy had also been the only midwife in the community. Some blamed her, before she died, for the loss of babies during winter. The treks to Lake Ontario's shore were dangerous, but Murin was a daring, carefree soul, sporting her long, bright yellow dress, which was frowned upon by dowdy neighbors wearing colorless rough homespun, and with her loose, long red hair flowing freely in the wind, which she refused to gather up in the restrictive St. Brigida's caps required of Huguenot wives and daughters. She refused to be frightened by the stories of dangerous Indians, wolves, bears, and the unknown holy spirits that might roam the foreign woodlands. One day, while trekking over the rugged lake shorelines, she gathered algae Amy had taught her to gather to make compounds and poultices to heal wounds and help people recover from fatigue. As she listened to the water splashing in regular waves against the rocks, just beyond the rough sandy beach, she heard floating melodies come and go as if carried in the onshore breeze. They were not from the lake, but from a mysterious part of the forest she had not yet explored. The sound grew stronger as she walked carefully through the thick brush and brambles before reaching a small clearing where the new grass had sprung up in a thick blanket. She watched a young Ojibwa brave with long black hair seated cross-legged before a small fire as he looked up at the swaying pines while playing a bewildering and hypnotic tune on his native flute. The tones were low and haunting, completely different from those she recognized from the Irish flute Muireann kept close, tied to a leather necklace around her neck and under her dress, such that Huguenot leaders would not find it in her hut should they inspect it for forbidden belongings. Women were not allowed such fanciful items in their beliefs, although her childhood in Dublin, Ireland, had been quite different. Her mother had been resistant to the restrictions of Huguenot purists, which at times had brought her insults, including witch. Still, before her death, she had been allowed unofficial privileges as the only midwife in the community. She was trusted by the French Huguenots, expats, and native Irish believers as well. One of her allowances was the love of carefree, lilting melodies of the Irish flute, which she had once passed to Muireann's mother. What the church fathers didn't know was the pagan powers which Muireann's mother, Abigail, had passed along. Muireann learned from Abigail how to summon the air spirits and the waves of any body of water, the calling of the winds. Muireann paused as the brave continued his playing, wondering if she should run back to the shore and then home, but the daring inside her heart chose differently. Muireann drew her flute from behind her dress. She pulled the instrument carefully to her lips, listening carefully to the melody he performed. Then she joined. He did not stir from his position. The two players joined their instruments in a lingering harmony. Birds quit singing in the forest. The gentle wind stilled. Notes of the two pipers blended into the smoke rising slowly skyward as scraps of sunlight flitted over the tiny meadow in a mesmerizing patchwork. Then, at a moment of combined reverie, they both stopped as he turned to discover his musical partner. The two stood, staring at each other for a minute. The brave shook his head and motioned for Muireann to leave, but she did not move. She broke the silence and dared to speak to him in broken French. "Can you understand my language?" she asked. "Yes, I speak French, but you seem to have trouble with it." He laughed at her, which made her upset as she bit her lip. Her Gaelic twang made part of her French garbled. "Well, I'll say that's the day a savage corrected my speech. My name is Muireann. I am surprised you are here. I thought these woods belonged to us, the Huguenots. No one owns the forest, silly little one. I am Nagamo, the son of the chief of my people." "You mean the Ojibwa tribe over the hills?" "Yes, but we do not call ourselves that. We are the Anishinabog, the true people. Perhaps it is too hard for you cloud-skinned to pronounce, especially when you can't speak French properly." He laughed again, making Muireann blush. "Aren't you afraid to be here in the wilderness with a dangerous red man?" "Ha!" she responded. "You should be afraid to be anywhere near a woman with red hair. Or don't your people know we are dangerous, maybe even evil?" Nagamo laughed heartily this time, as he put his flute away into a long woven sleeve to protect it as he traveled. "You are surprised with your bright dress and that hair the color of the paint we use on our faces when we fight our enemies. I have seen the people in your village. Their colors are drab like the turtles in mud. But you know the songs of the wind. It was amazing to hear your music joined with my call to the trees. It is my way. My name means he who is singing." "I am Muireann Besant," she replied as she put her flute back behind her dress. "My name means sea white, like the whitecaps that form out on the lake that are created by the wind. And where did you learn your perfect French?" "Welcome to the forest that owns itself, Muireann Besant. I was taught by the Catholic priests that have converted many of my people to a new religion, and one I do not follow. But we are restricted to our contact with your people because the priests say you follow another way, which is bad medicine and dangerous. I know your language because of these Christian shamans, but that is the only value they provided me." So what do you worship? That is rude for a woman to ask such things, but since you are not of the people, I will give you the truth. The forest spirit is within me, along with all the living things within, especially the wolves who are misunderstood and feared by you newcomers. They sometimes sing with me when I play my wind songs. And you are a follower of the one who was hanged from a tree? Yes, I respect and love Jesus, but I too am bound by the spirits of the earth. The waters speak to me more closely than anything that comes from a musty old book and ancient stories. You would have called the women in my family shamans, but we are also feared by those who are strict with the crosses we wear. Ah, I have heard of such women living with the English. We are not supposed to deal with them either, but I have listened at night, crawling through their huts as they speak of their beliefs and fears. You whites are afraid of everything around you, and especially those with red hair, but not our people, as some of us have had this red hair for many years because of the invaders who came here on their snake boats many moons before I was born. We killed most of them, but some were taken hostage and even married our women. That is an odd story, she said. I can't imagine who those people were, but that seems strange. I must return now with my gathering of medicine plants to help heal my people. Will you come here again and play your music? Yes, but I play alone. You should go home to your father and mother and not tell them you met me, not one like me, in these woods. Murin looked down and paused. My father was killed by French Catholics as he and my mother were trying to escape from France. Later, my mother died in a land far away called Ireland before I came here with my grandmother, but she also died from fever this winter. I am alone now. The only reason the villagers have not discarded me to the wilds is that I am the only one who is helping them with birthing children, and I know how to heal with herbs and plants like these. She showed him the green algae she had gathered from the lake. Oh, Nagama said, pausing. You are a wise woman. He bowed his head. My mother has also left for the sky home. She understood the blood and saved many of us from the diseases brought by the priests. Of course, they cursed her and claimed anyone who recovered was because of their belief in their God. He paused before continuing, and then he spoke with authority. Yes, I will be here every day, praying to these trees among the beasts of this land. You may play to the winds of the waters if you wish to join me, but do not tell your people. They will punish you. My father might do the same if he knew I spoke to you. They parted peacefully, but not without leaving indelible memories of each other. Over the next several weeks, as spring moved to early summer, the two met several times a week to share time in the sacred bower and blend their music until, as no surprise, they fell helplessly in love, disregarding all the warnings of both of their people. It was a time of joy and peaceful surrender for both of them, away from the restrictions and anger of their own people. Murin shared her stories of Ireland and its harsh winters, not unlike the cold of New France. Nagamo related stories of ancient cannibal giants his ancestors, the True People, fought, and their continuing wars with the Sioux people to the west. They both talked of the magic in the land. He described the magic of the Great Spirit that he called through the trees, and how birches, further inland, sounded like the great waves when winds blew over their bark. On one occasion, animals of the glade circled around them as they played, including a pack of wolves resting on their haunches near the forest edge, their heads swaying back and forth with their eyes closed. Murin once pulled Nagamo by the hand from the grove, bringing him to the seashore, where she called up the wind, creating waves upon the lake. This manifestation of her connection to nature drew them even closer together. Unfortunately, prying human eyes caught them together. Their secret was no more. Nogamo was taken one night before a council of elders in his village center. Their drums echoed through the hillsides as the tribal elders met, including his father, the chief. When the drumming stopped, the verdict was banishment of Nogamo from the tribe for having associated with a white woman who was an enemy to both the people and to the true Christian faith. Meanwhile, Huguenot leaders held a church meeting the same night. Siren was called forth to be charged for her sins against her faith as an idolatress and a woman of loose morals. She tried to speak in her defense, but was not allowed to talk before the men judging her. Her punishment was for her to be branded upon the forehead in the morning and then bound with stones to be tossed to the waters of the lake to drown. During that night, in the darkness before a full moon rose, Siren broke free from her captivity and soon ran to the forest where she knew her enemies would not dare enter. When she arrived, she found Nogamo sitting before a small fire where he was burning his flute, and added her instrument to the small blaze. She had stolen it out of her hut before rushing away in terror. The fugitives held each other closely as the full moon rose over the lake. Then, through the night's silence, they could hear the approaching yelling and grumbling of the Huguenot mob, bearing torches, moving slowly through the forest brush and tangles, using their lighted flames to guide them. It was clear they would eventually reach the couple, where the worst would come at last. Siren spoke first. "My love, I believe in the truth of the goddess of the waters as the women of my family have before me. I will go to the lake and beg them to protect me. But what of you?" Nogamo was silent for a moment and then whispered, "I will do the same. The Great Spirit is in these trees. I will beg for protection. We must do these things quickly, no matter what. We will meet again, even if in the spirit world, for our love is strong." They kissed briefly, shared one last hug, and then went their separate ways. Nogamo cried out to Gichimanutu, howling as the smoke from the burning flutes circled around him. A cold wind swirled through the trees, blowing out the torches of the villagers, leaving them lost in the woods in the darkness. Then, as his voice rose, the powerful Ojibwa warrior felt his skin tingle and change. As his face twisted and mutated, he felt his hands curl and reshape as fur grew over his once smooth skin. Siren waded into the lake where villagers had planned to kill her. But instead of fear, she projected her love for the waters and begged for their help. She felt waves swirling about her as wind rose and torrents spun around her dress, pulling it away from her. Her eyes were distorted by the powers swarming over her as her dress disappeared below her, leaving her naked before the full moon, as she was covered in scales and her legs blended into a flipper. Webbing grew between her new talons, replacing her delicate fingers. In the morning light, villagers finally came to the lovers' clearing, but there was little to be found except the barely warm ashes of a small fire and shredded clothing once worn by Nogamo. They rushed forward to the lake where there was only the yellow dress they so loathed floating upon the green waves of algae. The mob grew quiet, satisfied that the couple was truly damned after committing suicide by swimming out into the lake's deep waters to escape their punishment. To this day, on warm early summer nights, as the full moon crests over shores of Lake Ontario, campers have reported eerie sounds rising from the edge of the waters. Some have sworn to have even seen the outline of a woman, half naked, sitting at the water's edge next to a large wolf. She sings hypnotic tones over the night air as her wolf partner howls in harmony, their shadow lighted by the reflection of the moon across Lake Ontario.